Greetings. You've stumbled upon Esoteric Babble. Welcome. I'm Sunray. Today we're going to talk about different planes of existence. And naturally, if we're going to talk about different planes of existence, we should probably discuss what is a plane of existence. I believe we're all familiar with the material plane of existence. That is our normal waking life, where we're sitting in chairs, we're watching TV, we're cutting up food, mowing the lawn, talking to people, doing whatever, driving a car. This is the material realm. We can study it. There's stars, there are galaxies, there's cells, there's protons and quarks, and there's geological features and of the planet and so on and so forth. That's the material realm. We all know that realm. And by know, I mean we kind of experience it. I'm not saying that we have plumbed its depths, but that is sort of the normal realm that we inhabit. Some people would say that when we dream, we're actually going to another realm, the astral plane. I would argue that even in our material realm, when we're doing, particularly, if I could speak, particularly when we are doing repetitive tasks, our brains can go somewhere else. And you might not think of this normally as being some other plane of existence, but our thoughts and our ideas, they can seem to be, they don't have to be right in contact with what's going on. As a matter of fact, one big goal of meditation is to bring our awareness to the very present. But I think our mental faculties can kind of start to create other worlds. And that's sort of a topic for another time. But even ideas of the self, based upon memory and, maybe selective memory and editing and so on and so forth, and just memories of the past or our thinking of the past is not necessarily would not necessarily comport with objective reality. That might be said sort of, I'm fumbling to say that in some clear way, but I think we've all probably had a moment or two where we realized we had thought of something in the past a certain way and turned out that that wasn't how things happen. And of course, we can build up models of what the future will be like. Sometimes we build up very negative models of what the future will be like, and they don't come to pass because they weren't really founded on any sort of reality. So in a sense, just our different mental and emotional states, those are kinds of different planes of existence. But typically, when planes of existence are brought up, we're talking more about things like heaven and hell, Plato's world of forms, the 31 planes of existence in Theravada Buddhism, and so on and so forth. So I can imagine there are a lot of skeptics and materialists who sort of rolling their eyes and thinking, well, this is sort of absurd. And I think in the past, some retorts to that are, well, where are these realms? Can you point to heaven or hell? Can you point to the world of forms? Can you point to like a mathematical realm? That's another one, by the way, that I think exists. As a Platonist, I do think mathematics is something that transcends the universe, and that our universe has sort of come into existence in agreement with mathematical principles and has not generated them. But we could respond to the materialist skeptic these days, because there's sort of a new development that's happened. We could say, well, can you point to the multiverse? And I'm not saying all skeptics, maybe most skeptics don't believe that there's a multiverse. But for people who do entertain such a notion, it's the same idea that, well, where is it? It could be everywhere. It could be in, some other dimension that we just aren't aware of. An idea I got hip to a long time ago, and I think it was actually just in Scientific America. They said, you can imagine our universe is just like a flat, we've collapsed it to a 2-dimensional representation. It's just a flat, maybe an infinite plane. There could be an infinite number of those planes parallel, and they could all be a millimeter apart, but we would have no idea of knowing that, unless somehow, like maybe gravity, maybe some other force could travel from one of those planes to another. But my main point here is that the multiverse has sort of opened the door back up, I think, for planes of existence to be discussed, which would sort of show some predilections on the part of, well, let's put it like this. If you believe in the multiverse, but you scoff at an idea like heaven or hell, why? Why is one more acceptable than the other? Certainly one is not more scientific than the other. And I know some people say, well, you shouldn't argue for less scientific methods. But I would say that the point about the multiverse is that it shows that people come at problems from a creative point of view. They put together some sort of theory, and then you look and see. I mean, maybe there's no way of ever finding that there's another universe that exists. That statement may not even make sense to some people. But the whole discussion of the multiverse is simply to point out that if you are a Platonist and you believe in things like the world of forms, I think that the multiverse gives us sort of another model, a way of thinking about these other levels of existence. But there's also another way to come at this whole topic, and that is from the first-person experiential point of view. I believe it was David Bentley Hart in his book entitled God, near the end, when he mentioned that scientists or certain scientists or skeptics are constantly asking for, well, I would believe in God if there were proof. And he makes the excellent point that if you want proof of the existence of God, and let's take God, and we could say something like the one, or even maybe nirvana. Well, it may be the case that you need to sit down and do some meditation, contemplative prayer. Maybe you need to empty your mind and do that for months. To an extent, this is found in, I forget which appendix, in the Illuminatus trilogy, where Anton Wilson and Robert Shea, they talk about how you could get up every morning and recite this little poem to Ra for 40 days. I think they say do it in morning and evening. And their claim is you'll feel better at the end of those 40 days. And this sort of goes back to, not the David Bentley Hart part, but the Illuminatus part, sort of goes back to Aleister Crowley, who I think came at things from, he wasn't very interested in what the actual ontological status was of certain entities. He said, we'll talk about demons and angels and all these sorts of powers, but we don't have to believe that they exist, but we can sort of, we don't have to believe that they exist just like a table or chair exists, but we don't have to be certain about the ontological status to know that they're useful. And that really brings us to this idea of the planes of existence. Whether or not you believe that we have an astral body or an etheric body, and that there's an astral realm or etheric realm to be explored in some physical sense, it probably behooves us to go ahead and at least try the experiment. These are experiences that many people have reported. And you might go through them and say, yeah, I had this experience, and then come up with a whole other materialist understanding of what is, quote, actually going on. But I don't think that you can do that first or do that only. That is, I don't think we can sit down and simply say, oh, well, this is just sort of nonsense. Everyone's just in their own heads. We all dream, and it's probably worthwhile investigating our dreams, no matter what you think the status of a dream is. If we come to some conclusion about dreams without ever really thinking about our dreams and maybe comparing them to other people's dreams and so on and so forth, we've left out a lot of data. And likewise, if we just think that it's simply just absurd and silly or childish or foolish and so on and so forth, to believe in, quote unquote, these other planes of existence without trying to make any actual contact with them, I think that we're leaving out a lot of data. There are real experiences there to be had. Sort of like lucid dreaming. Now, I've only had like 3 lucid dreams, and I'm hoping to have many more. But until you have one, you might think they're not a real thing, or I mean, it's really hard to have an opinion. I knew people who had them, and I don't even know that they called them that, but had dreams like that. And I spontaneously had one once, and then I thought, well, this is definitely worth exploring. And I mention this all the time, but if you are, we can make analogies with like drinking a cup of coffee. You'll know if that cup of coffee's too cold or too hot to drink, irrespective of what other people tell you. Outside observers or theorizers might not have all the data. They might think something is going on. Maybe they've even taken the temperature with some sort of like one of these new fangled thermometers that you can use in the kitchen and even on people. It might be broken, You're probably more likely to trust yourself if you take a sip of coffee and it's just tepid, as opposed to someone telling you that same cup of coffee is actually 110 degrees Fahrenheit or something. You will know. So this always, like I said, this is really just coming back to this first-person experience of reality. I also think it's tied in directly with theories of consciousness. And again, there are people who, I don't know why I said again there, but there are physicalists, materialists who would say that consciousness is just something that's illusory. It just happens. It's no more special than digestion is special. That's something the stomach does and the heart pumps blood. And our brain produces this illusory feeling of consciousness. But I would say in this case, I think consciousness is something that I am very reluctant to give up that common sense intuition. Intuition, common sense can be wrong about many things, many things. But I would say this is one that's very basic to being human. And to give it up means that we are just automata, or automatones, however you want to make that plural. And I'm not willing to go there. I'm not really willing to say that I'm a robot. And it's not simply an aesthetic or rational decision. It's just an experiential one. And consequently, I am open to the idea that consciousness is its own irreducible phenomenon. And when I say that, I mean, I'm being very vague there. I should say that there's a phenomenon that's irreducible, some sort of irreducible, I cannot speak, some sort of irreducible phenomenon that actually produces consciousness. It would be like super consciousness, and our little meager brains filter this super consciousness, just like a fly's brain does. But we can imagine there being super sentient civilizations, alien civilizations, who participate in this consciousness even more than we do and experience reality in far different ways. But when you think of reality like that, as consciousness being this kind of ocean that is just dripping into our individual bodies, it's not hard to believe that we could tune our consciousness, or our receptor, if you want to think about it that way, to sort of pick up on some other aspect. Just like our eyes detect a small sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, we can't detect with our eyes radio waves or even infrared or ultraviolet rays. With other tools, we can. And it's possible through taking drugs that our physical brain is changed enough that it allows us to pick up kind of a different aspect of this super consciousness. It's possible that when we meditate, that we do develop an etheric body or astral body, which can go explore these other realms. I think it just comes down to being open. Again, you could, at the end of the day, after you do all this experimenting, first-person experimenting, taking in all these experiences, maybe you write it off as some other just byproduct of the physical brain. But it strikes me that doing that before we make these investigations is, it's like shooting ourselves in the foot. I mean, why? We know so little about our interior states. And I don't know that I don't know that we can ever find out what we need to find out by leaving it up to scientists in the same way that we would leave our bodies to be understood in that way. Of course, people can look at these physical objects and understand the nervous system and the circulatory system and all these amazingly complex things about the body, but they can be understood from an outside point of view. But mental states, emotional states, states of consciousness, I think we have to try to make that, we have to do that investigation on our own. And thinking about different planes of existence and the techniques for trying to arrive at them, like the plane of infinite space or the plane of infinite consciousness in Buddhism, and trying to travel into the astral realm. I think that, as I said before, it behooves us to make the attempt before we pass any judgment on the quote reality. Hopefully this meandering babble has been somewhat enlightening. If not, or if so, leave a comment and let me know. Peace to all beings everywhere.